Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's a Taste to Consider podcast. I'm back. I know y'all heard that plenty of times before, but I am back. I'm back for an episode. So let's get right into it. Let me start by introducing the show. It's a Taste to Consider podcast. I'm your host, Derek Silver, and we back. Back for another episode. Yes, indeed. We back for another episode. I don't even remember how long ago it's been since I recorded, but I ain't even surprised that I'm recording right now. You know, it's Mercury retrograde, Mercury Gatorade, all that good stuff. And so I'm coming back, I got some things on my mind, some things to say. And it's funny because I got the setup down here in the basement, and this is where I've been recording for years. Even back during the You and You podcast day, it was just a different setup. And the board was still sitting down here, the microphone, all that good stuff, and I contemplated going back and forth. This is the state of the podcast, by the way. And I, been going back and forth. Damn, burp number one, and it ain't even no drink here. So, it's just like I'm supposed to be sitting right here right now recording. Don't know where that burp came from. Yeah, so I was going back and forth whether, I was going to end the podcast or not. If it was time, I was giving it a lot of thought. I was praying on it, stuff like that. And I'm just like, I don't know. I was having mixed feelings. I was trying to go a lot of ways with it, from the emotional route, from the intellectual route, spiritual route, all that. I was trying to hit it from all angles to really figure out if this was the end of it. But then, like a few months ago, something happened, and that's what this episode is about. And I'm gonna get into that after I, give a state of the podcast. And I've been doing like a lot of reflecting on the podcast and what direction I should go in, if I should end it. Looking at the YouTube page and the other shows that I was doing and how I felt about those other shows and stuff. And, just my journey of podcasting, period. And, I started podcasting back in 2017. So we 8 years into podcasting. Started with the group podcast, You and You podcast. Had a great time with it. Loved doing it. It was a great time to hang out with the fellas, to, have, funny conversations, talk about, just regular stuff. And that's how the podcast and stuff just all came to existence. I got the idea, like, what I'm saying? We was just doing so much talking about things on the group chat and having a good time or whatever. And I'm like, why don't we just do a podcast? So we eventually got that together, doing the podcast, and, having a good time with that. And, then even in the midst of doing the group podcast, I had, aspirations to do my own podcast, and for it not to be, the same as the group podcast in terms of the topics that we were doing, because the group podcast was more of a, like barbershop talk and stuff like that. And my solo podcast, what I was feeling at the time was I wanted to talk about, mainly, mental health at that time. I just started, I was like a year into doing my blog, I believe. And the blog was going well, it was getting great feedback and stuff like that. I was um, getting opportunities from the blog, and then adding on the podcast to it, I was getting extra opportunities from that as well, and other feedback. And also, with my solo podcast, I wanted to talk about other interesting things that I'm into, more deeper stuff than what the group podcast was talking about. Um, and when I started off good. Had some great topics that I did, like a lot of research into some of the things. Some of the episodes that stick out in my minds, like one of them was circumcised minds and stuff like that, and um, the the episode I did on the Willie Lynch theory. Um, I had like some real good episodes in there that I was getting real good feedback on. I remember just getting messages from dudes and just people in general, but mainly like black dudes or whatever, and they was, um, hitting me up and stuff like that, and giving me feedback on, being vulnerable and speaking about men's mental health and stuff like that, and everything was going good. And but like along the way, I got caught up, and just reflecting back on it and stuff like that, I got caught up. And I think when I started to really get caught up and go in a different direction, um, for the most part, because I was still doing, mental health and talking about things that was outside the norm of what everybody is talking about on their podcast these days, relationships and stuff like that, and celebrity crap and stuff like that. I got caught up. And I think when I started to get caught up is when um, the group podcast stopped recording together. And I guess I felt as though I had to incorporate some of the group podcast format into my podcast, because I was doing a lot of producing on the group podcast with like getting the topics together and stuff like that, and solely doing it on my podcast. So I guess I felt as though that I had to incorporate the two formats, so to speak, and I think that's where I got caught up. And I'd be lying if I didn't say my personal life at times didn't leak into it a little too much, to the point where um, the episodes were geared, made certain topics or something like that, or my motivation for saying certain things were geared to like getting messages out from my personal life. And at the time when those things were happening, I knew it, and I recognized it, and I was like, nah, you can't get caught up into that and all that other stuff. You gotta, stick to, just keeping it real objective with everything. But I was still getting caught up with the formats being merged, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I could talk about those surface level conversations, all the conversations that's majority of these podcasts are talking about today, all the clips you see on social media and stuff like that. I can do that. I have no problem with that. I'm very talented in that. I'm very talented when it comes to putting together shows and stuff, and making sure topics align, and producing a title that is provocative, that go with those topics and stuff like that. That was never the problem. The talent wasn't the problem, but it was more so me getting caught up into not being me. Not more so. I guess also just getting caught up into everything that was going on social media, seeing all these podcasts and feeling as though that I may have to compete with them, or you know how the rise in popularity of some podcasts and stuff, and that on that side of competing and stuff like that, and then also being afraid to be me, continue being me, because some of the topics my early topics, I remember I used to get like um feedback in different directions. Feedback where, thank you for saying that, I really needed to hear that. You made me feel heard, stuff like that. Then I'll also get, oh, I never thought about that before. Thank you for, opening my eyes to that, or my mind to that. Then I would get certain feedback. Why would you even talk about something like that? Particularly on that circumcised minds episode. And I remember when I did get that feedback, I was just like, it's it's my life, it's my podcast and stuff like that. And I remember saying that, like, what that got to do with you and stuff like that. I remember going back and forth about that particular episode when I got that particular feedback. And I guess, with me getting caught up into trying to live up to the trendy stuff, or what is quote unquote popular, as opposed to just being me in the space of podcasting, and continuing on that road, and having the people who are interested in what I got to say, and bringing people who aren't necessarily interested in the same things. And I won't say it. I don't know why the word convert keep coming in my mind while I'm thinking, and that's definitely not the word. I ain't trying to convert nobody. I don't y'all already know I don't like followers, but I went totally away from what the title of my podcast is. The title of my podcast is A Taste to Consider. And the reason why I named it A Taste to Consider was because how I explain it is, everybody has different tastes. Everybody has different interests, things that they like, and all that other stuff. And my podcast was supposed to be giving you something different to consider, whether it be my opinion, something that I researched, a documentary that I watched, a different perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And I got caught up and went totally away from that. And I just started, it got to the point, like, toward the tail end of like some of those episodes, and even when I was doing a lot of those relationship episodes, I wasn't excited about doing those episodes. Granted, like I said, I was very talented. I'm very talented, and I was putting together some good shows. But I wasn't all in it, And it was like I was trying to make myself be excited about it. Even though I knew I produced a great show, and had good topics and provocative title and all that other stuff, and all of it came together perfectly. I was making myself be excited about it because of my talent, but it wasn't really me. I'm very curious. I'm very analytical. I'm a thinker. I'm very rebellious. I like to push the limit. And I was just talking about the shit that everybody else was talking about on their podcast, and all the shit that you see on social media. And it was just so surface level. And I ain't trying to, downplay anybody else or take shots at anybody else, but like, I like to go deeper with stuff. I really like to go deeper with stuff. And that's one of the reasons why at times I'm so quiet, because I'm always thinking. And sometimes I'm just not interested in having surface level conversations, particularly when people aren't open minded with those type of conversations. I can have those surface level conversation as long as people are open minded, and a lot of people aren't open minded when it comes to that celebrity stuff or to relationship stuff. And relationships is deep as hell, and people don't want to go deep. So yeah, I got caught up, and I got caught up in on my outline. I wrote my mistakes, and I guess I can't say those were mistakes, and I could say they were I went off the path, or I got caught up. I fell into the trap. That's another term that I kept thinking of. I fell into the trap. But I started the podcast with good intentions to give something for people to think about. I wanted to push the limits. I wanted to have different conversations. I wanted to display all things that have to do with me, my personality, my thought process, how I look at things, and things that I'm passionate about, particularly mental health. And even in the midst of me not podcasting and stuff like that, as a black man, and how I love to be an advocate for black people, the more and more I've been being involved with mental health, and even my journey with my own mental health, I've become even more passionate about black men's mental health and young black men's mental health. So it's like my passions have grown over the years, with podcasting and being on social media and taking these breaks and reflecting and stuff like that. So my passions have grown even more. And I'm here today. I'm sitting here Friday evening, after work. I just got off a phone call with the vice president of the government contracting company that I work for, having a conversation about my future and a raise, asking for a raise and all that other stuff. So like right now, I'm like really in like in a mode of reflection and questioning things and stuff like that. But what brought me back to the seat and in front of the mic and with in front of this half dusty board was, I don't remember how long ago, maybe a few weeks, couple of months ago. I was listening to a sermon by Creflo, and I've been trying to get, well, I ain't been trying, I've been doing. I've been strengthening my relationship with God, and being more intentional about being in the Word, and just trying to learn more and get my faith stronger and stuff like that. And there was this sermon that he was talking about. And the sermon he was talking about. He had the sermon, and he was talking about Satan. And he started off by saying how Satan wasn't Satan at first. Satan was Lucifer at first. Lucifer turned into Satan. And that was probably one of the most profound sermons that I've heard in a long time. And it really caught me off guard, because I'm like, damn, I never thought about that. And the angle that he came from, I was like, damn, that's really smart, but it's also very deep. And it had me thinking for like days after hearing that. I just kept thinking, I'm like, damn, even Satan, no, let me start that over. Even Lucifer has an origin story. I'm not gonna get all deep into the sermon or anything. This is just for context. So Lucifer had an origin story, which turned him into Satan. And then it just had me thinking about, reflecting on my life and just people in general, people that I know, just the whole world, period. And I'm sitting here thinking about Lucifer origin story, turning him into Satan. And I'm like, everybody has an origin story. Everybody has an origin story. And it's important for us to understand what our origin story is, because it is how we think, it's how we perceive things, it's how we perceive people, it's how we go along our day-to-day life. It's how we conduct ourselves in relationships. It's how we look at relationships, romantic, platonic, whatever, work relationships, whatever. Whether that origin story is from our childhood or it's just a moment in our lives, because there's multiple origin stories in a person's life. I think about my life. I have plenty of origin stories that got me in the place where I am now. Got me thinking the way I think now. Got me looking at things the way I look at now. Relationships, my ambitions, my drive, mental health, whatever. Everybody has an origin story. And I'm like, damn. I talk so much on this podcast about my origin story, why moments in time where I got me to the place of suffering from depression and anxiety. Granted, I y'all don't know everything, but there's moments in time, there's reasons why I've suffered from depression at times, why I suffered from anxiety at times. My childhood being one. And then there's even moments in time as a teenager, as an adult, that have compounded on to that origin story. Or they may have changed the origin story in a way. Or they've been a new point in time where there's a new origin of how that depression is affecting me or that anxiety is affecting me. And I'm big into superhero movies, DC, Marvel. And you think about it. Batman has his origin story. Why did he want to become Batman? Because in his childhood, he witnessed his parents being robbed and killed right in front of him. That's why he wanted to become Batman. You got your origin story of Thanos. Why he wanted to snap his fingers and get all the Infinity Stones and get rid of half of the population. Tony Stark, Iron Man, had his origin story. Everybody has an origin story. You don't have to be a superhero to have an origin story. But like I said, it's important that we understand our origin story, because are we a hero or are we a villain walking through our lives because of those origin stories? At times I've been a villain plenty of times because of my origin story. I was very angry when I was dealing with depression, particularly in my 20s. In my 20s, I was very angry, very angry. Always getting into fights, always starting fights. I ain't going to even say always getting into fights, always starting fights or ready to buck up. You know what I'm saying? I was ready. I was always ready to fight. I was looking for a reason to fight in my 20s because I was very angry because I felt like the world was against me. I felt like I didn't have any support. I felt all alone by myself. And that came from my childhood, the things that I experienced in my childhood. I was a villain. But then at the same time, I was a hero because I was always ready to be there for somebody and and you know be their savior and stuff like that. Always trying to do good and stuff because I know that I experienced pain and stuff and how I didn't have that support system. So I wanted to be support system for everybody. I was loyal to a fault. But then at the same time, and this the thing right here, this the thing that most people don't think about. Even though I was a hero to everybody else, I was a villain to myself. I was a villain to myself because I was trying to people please and I was putting everybody before me and I was trying to gain friendship or I was trying to prove my friendship. I was trying to prove my love. I was trying to prove my worth and my value by being everybody's hero, but I was being a villain to myself. Crazy. And you have to ask that. You have to ask that. You have to ask, are you being a hero or a villain to yourself? I became a hero to myself when I started going to therapy. I became a hero for myself when I started going to therapy. When I stopped being a villain to myself and putting everybody else before me and started looking out for myself. I was a villain to myself just by beating myself up all the time, not believing in myself. But there was a reason for that. There was an origin for that. There was an origin for me beating myself up, for me not valuing myself, me not seeing my worth, me not thinking I'm worthy, me thinking that I don't deserve love. There was an origin to that. But I became a hero once I started going to therapy, once I started to be more mindful and intentional of putting myself first and stop blaming everybody else in the world for where I am, my struggles and stuff like that. And granted, I still deal with the stuff like that. And that's another thing. I had to learn that two things can be true at the same time. I can still be a hero for myself while still battling the villain inside of me or the villain that I see outside of me or the villains that I allow to be in my life based off of what I'm used to, what I'm used to experiencing, what I'm used to telling myself, what I'm used to thinking about myself. And that's why I say it's important on understanding your origin story. Because if you don't understand it, you could be out here blaming everybody, looking at everybody as an enemy, as a villain. But that's just because you choosing to be, you continuing to choose to be a villain to yourself. So you keep interacting with the same people, or you just don't want to open up your mind to see anything different, that maybe that somebody is trying to help you, or somebody is trying to love you, or somebody is trying to care about you, that everybody isn't against you. And like I said, two things can be true at one time. Like, because I was thinking the other day, I have a lot of confidence in myself, but at the same time, I still have certain insecurities that get in the way of that confidence. And just thinking about sitting right here in front of this mic right now in the podcast, I'm very confident in my talent and how I produce shows and the things that I say, but I still struggle with being vulnerable. And I think just going back to the state of the podcast, that's something that I left out. I think a part of me also was afraid to continue being vulnerable, afraid to continue speaking about mental health, the things that I've struggled with, my journey into therapy, and how I been working through all that stuff. Excuse me, burp number two. I think I started to be burp number three. This is crazy. Y'all don't see no drink down here, nothing like how it normally is. But yeah, I think I started to be afraid and really self-conscious and insecure about continuing to be vulnerable. And even in the past few days before today when I sat down to record, I was just thinking like, is it worth it? I think it was 2 days ago I woke up and the first thing on my mind was the podcast and recording this episode. Cause I literally had this origin story episode for a month or so. And I was like, is it worth it? Is it worth it to be vulnerable? Is it worth it to be vulnerable? Cause I'm sitting here thinking like, what is it going to prove? Like, is it going to go anywhere? Is it going to get me anywhere? And that's and that's probably a lot of times where I get caught up into really not fulfilling my passion and maybe what God called me to do, to share my story, which I feel I feel majority of the time, but then other time I don't. But I'm getting too caught up into what everybody else is going to think and where it's going to take me, and that shouldn't be my motivation. And I'm saying shouldn't when I know I should be saying I shouldn't be questioning that shouldn't. It just shouldn't be my motivation, but I question it. And I think that's where another part of the podcast started going in a different direction, when I started questioning myself and my motivations were too concerned about everybody else as opposed to just doing what I set out to do when I felt it inside of me that I need to share my story. And I need to share myself because I'm such a private person. I'm such a private person and I'm such a guarded person. And I have an origin for that. I dealt with it in my friendships, my relationships, platonic relationships, work relationships, romantic relationships, even with myself, being vulnerable with myself. When I had times alone or when I'm speaking to God, guarded with God. And there's an origin to all of that. And I'm sure, I know I've talked about it before on other episodes, and I'm sure I'm going to get into it even further or deeper as I go along, in other episodes on what I feel as though that I'm getting back to and I need to get back to what I originally set out to do, what I originally feel as though sparked inside of me in 2016 when I started my blog, and in 2019 when I decided to do a solo show. So I asked well, I don't ask, I challenge everybody to just reflect on your origin story. Think about the things you struggle with, whether it is individually or what you struggle with your thinking or how you perceive yourself, other people, how you interact with other people, and it's not even difficulties, like I said, because even though I was gun ho trying to be a savior to everybody, trying to be ultimately, the ultimate warrior when it comes to loyalty with people, and that's a good thing, but it really wasn't a good thing because, it was people pleasing. I was putting other people before myself. I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to prove my my worthiness, my value. I was trying to do things to receive attention, to receive to receive love, and like I said, there's all the origin to that. So yeah, challenge yourself. Just think about this episode, think about the things that I said, and see how it relates to your life, your origin story, your moments in life that changed you. Changed you because it's constant change. It's constant change. And just I've seen my growth in certain areas of my life where I used to react differently to things because of my origin stories in my life. Things would keep me down or put me in a depression or take my motivation away or, just zap all the energy out of me, and me thinking that I had discipline, but then is it really discipline if I'm so easily swayed, and that's making me think about, my journey with in the gym and weightlifting, bodybuilding and stuff like that, and just even other things in my life. And it's like that stuff is all connected because you'll see the commonality in how you react or how you deal with similar situations but in different settings or spaces. So yeah, just think about that, origin stories, and everybody got an origin story. And it's just crazy how that one sermon really pinpointed this for me. And it's not like I didn't know that things in our life impact us and make us certain traumas or events or rejections and even good moments. And I know I'm focusing more on the bad moments, but I feel as though, particularly for us black people, like we are more negative centered individually and even when we interact with each other. And I'm sure. I've got notes on topics that I want to talk about how we are our own worst enemy, us black people, us black Americans or whatever. But yeah, this has been a episode of A Taste to Consider podcast. It's good to be back. It's good to have you back. It's good to have this moment, have this time, and even to share this and share what I've been thinking about when it comes to the origin stories and even the state of the podcast and just where I'm at and where I've been sitting because I haven't been going anywhere. It's just been sitting in neutral. Yeah, but I appreciate all the people who've been sticking with me and supporting me and wondering where I've been, because I ain't even been on social media like that, because social media just is not the same anymore. Um, and and this is going to be, um, I guess I'll say, a test for me getting back into the podcasting, and getting back to my original plan and my original spark that was inside of me, my original passion, my original um, goal. How I deal with social media again, with promoting the show, and um, yeah. So we'll see, and I'm interested in seeing how this will go, and I'll be lying if I didn't say I don't have a little excitement around it, because I feel like I've grown with social media, but now I really want to test it, and one of the things that I've learned years ago when I first started therapy, you can do all the studying, reading, uh, talking, counseling, therapy you want, but it's not going to matter until you get out into the world and actually have to use your tools, and see where you're at. That's sitting in isolation, and I'm an expert in sitting in isolation, and and learning and studying and researching. I'm an expert at that. But it really don't matter until you really step out there and start living, interacting with the people, interacting with the world and stuff. So yeah, this has been another episode of a Taste to Consider podcast. Make sure y'all do y'all thing. Download on the streaming apps, Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Make sure y'all share, download. That is the most important thing that you can do for the show, and any podcast or streaming content creator and stuff, is download, like, and share. And also, shout out to the YouTubers, the YouTube people watching this video. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gone. It's been another episode of a Taste to Consider podcast. I'm your host, Derek Silver, and I am out.